Good evening. We are live on one of our Facebook channels, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, but we need to bring in everybody on Facebook on a Sunday night game week. So we're going to let this open up and breathe just for a second. Just swirl it around in your glass a little bit and sniff it like some wine snob. No, I kid. But welcome in, everybody. This is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your co-host tonight, Scott Kennedy. No, I'm not Chad Jensen. Chad Jensen is out in the woods trying to get internet through rabbit ears and tinfoil on them, and it's just not working very well for him. And on this side over here is Zack Kelberman. Zach and I have done lots of shows together, and we have a blast doing this, so we hope you have fun with us tonight. And welcome in, Zach. It's good to be here tonight.
Scott, have you seen Black Sheep? Like the sequel to Tommy Boy?
I haven't. It's not the same characters. It's just kind of like a continuation of the story.
Yeah, same actors, different storylines.
Yeah, okay. No, I didn't see it, but Tommy Boy is one of my favorite comedies.
Let me just say Black Sheep is criminally underrated. There's a scene in there that reminded you said rabbit ears and trying to get reception. There's a scene when Chris Farley's like walking along the top of the mountain with this big, the long cell phones back then. He hits a tree and rolls down the hill. It's just hilarious. So,
were you on a walkie-talkie? Did I hear a niner in there?
So I could actually hear you getting fatter.
That's one of the great things. One of the great things about kids is I always said, what would it be like to be able to watch some of those things for the first time again? I'm like, wait, that's what kids are. Until you get halfway through Raiders of the Lost Ark and you're really excited about it. And they're like, can I do something else? You're like, go. This movie's epic, but whatever. But speaking of epic, we're on an epic week. Last week was, it's bye week. Yeah, right, bye week. Did anybody feel like they were cheated out of Broncos news or excitement last week with the cut downs and then the big signing with Russell Wilson?
No, a lot of stuff to talk about last week. It made that dead period fly by, and when the Broncos take the field tomorrow, they're getting ready for Seattle. I mean, week 1 is literally around the corner, 8 days away. I am so happy, Scott. Can't wait to whoop their behinds.
Yeah, and there's so many people that are fantasy players that week 1 could be, 3 or 4 days away, really. And on that note, it is winning season. It's officially returned the NFL, and with the regular season just about here, there are plenty of opportunities to win at MyBookie. Whether you're a seasoned bettor or a first-timer, MyBookie gets you the most for your money with a double deposit bonus up to $1,000. It's simple. Follow the link in the show's description and sign up using promo code Wilson22 on your first deposit, and you'll instantly double your money with MyBookie.
It really is simple, Broncos country. For example, a $250 deposit puts $500 in your account, and you can use your funds to bet on as many individual games, contests, or props as you want. Bet on team winning totals, predict the Super Bowl winner, or use the MyBookie prop builder to give yourself the edge you need to secure the bag. Again, use code Wilson22 when you sign up and get double your deposit. Follow the link in the comments and notes below and click join now. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
Thanks. I almost said Chad. Thanks, Zach. All these
You're welcome.
4-letter names,
Nick.
And stuff. We only share about 6 names amongst. Never mind. So there was one thing before we get into the Seahawks that I wanted to touch on, because the last time I was on with y'all was, right after the signing, and Michaela came on and with a super asked a question. He says, what do you make of the rumors that there was a deadline? There was a deadline or no deal. And I was in the background going, I'm telling you, this is what happened. This is what happened. And it turns out, that's what happened. And yeah, was it sensationalized? Of course. Of course it was. Was there a deadline? Yeah, there was. Hey, we want to get this done by X date. And if it's not done, no problem. But now we're going to focus on football. No big deal. But if it's not done now, I don't want to think about this during the season. I don't want to be asked about it. I want to be able to say we're going to handle that after the season. I don't want to say, we're negotiating. I don't want anything about it. Talk to my agent. Nothing. So if it's not done by this date, it doesn't mean no deal. It just means not yet. And there was the good story on the front page of milehighhuddle.com just with George Payton pretty much saying exactly that.
Yeah, a lot of times players set these hard deadlines right before the season. And like Scott was saying, if it doesn't get done then, we're tabling talks until the offseason. Talk to me then. And if you want to talk to me, you can reach my agent. I'm busy worrying about football. That's what
Mhm.
Russell Wilson wanted to be about. And you can call him corny or whatever you want, but the man is committed and devoted 1 billion% to the game of football and the Denver Broncos. I'm sure negotiations got contentious, like we talked about on the podcast earlier this week. When you're negotiating a contract worth almost in total $300 million with a franchise quarterback, things can get tricky. It's not like, checking out your local Walmart. It's a lot of different
That
hoops
can
you
be
have to
pretty
jump
tricky,
through.
Zach.
It's not easy anymore with the self checkout,
That
but
can get
that's a whole
tricky.
other story. But it's a hard process to go through, and along the way, you have to set standards between yourself and the team and kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah, again, a $250 million extension is going to take a little time. Did it probably get heated at times? Sure. That's why you've got an agent. If both sides should be feeling that they got a good deal, both sides should feel like they gave something up. That's pretty much the heart of a good deal. But, the sensationalized headline of, deal or no deal, baloney. This was Russell Wilson. I admire them for saying, listen, it gets done now by this day, or we're putting it off because it's time for football. And this week, it's time for football. And they're all business. So I want to say hello to some folks in the chat coming in. Phil McLaughlin kicking it, breaking the ice with some stars on Facebook. Said, good evening, Zach and Scott. Hey, that's us. One more week. Let's ride. I tell you what, are you happy to be on national TV with your first game, or would you rather have a nice Sunday 1:00 kickoff
No.
and not have to wait an extra 30 hours?
No, I'm fine with it. I want the Seahawks in prime time. I want the whole country, I want the whole world to see what Russell Wilson and the Broncos are going to do to Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, and the Seahawks. I want everyone to see that.
So would you rather have the Thursday night, or would you rather have a long week of preparation and go Sunday or Monday morning?
I'm actually not a big fan of Thursday night games.
Mhm.
I remember when they used to be like maybe twice a year, and they became an every week staple. So I prefer a Sunday or Monday game, but I'm so happy it's in prime time.
Yeah, I liked the college Thursday night games, but hell, I haven't watched those. It's like Thursdays, like I'm still doing family stuff. It's almost like we had our days, our football schedule. We could kind of plan around that until they try and put football into every part of our schedule. It's like, well, something's got to give, and it ain't going to be the kids. I'll tell you that much. But Phil, thanks again for coming in. Garth Knight has come in also. He says, MHH, as a new Bronco fan, I got to know if there's a scientific advantage from the team flying from mile high to sea level for Monday Night Football. I absolutely believe that there's an advantage in cooler climates. You read about cyclists training up in altitude all the time. I believe there is. I think it's probably a little tougher for West Coast guys to come down into the South, playing in Carolina, playing Jacksonville, playing Miami, Tampa outdoors. The Atlanta's inside now, so that's that, and they were always terrible. So, those teams aren't historically that great, but I think that's a bigger difference. Of course, I think it's also worse for a team like the Dolphins to go to Mile High in the altitude in the snow in December. I think that's even worse. So yeah, I think there's an advantage trading in at Mile High for sure.
Yeah, I just think it's a somewhat weak excuse to fall back on one way or the other. I mean, these are multi-million-dollar world-class athletes. They can adjust to a different climate for 3 hours in a given day. But, hopefully it doesn't affect the Broncos too much. And like Scott was saying, this is not a Denver team or even a Seattle team going to Miami in September when it's brutally hot, or Buffalo when it's brutally cold. There's a fairly decent trade-off, I think, between Seattle and Denver. So I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, the climate shouldn't be too big of a problem. But yeah, I think you've got a little bit more air in your lungs when you're going the next day for sure. Assuming that assuming everything's equal, meaning we're training equally. But there might be something to be said that maybe I can't train as hard because of the altitude. You never know. It's not going to end up being the long-term difference. But yeah, Garth, I think there is an advantage to training at altitude. That's why you see so many Olympians and Tour de France guys and world-class cyclists try and do it that way. KB82, that's our buddy Kenneth Booker coming in blue. He says, who will have the better season, Hamler or Montrell?
It's got to be Hamler, right? I mean, he's penciled in as the wide receiver 3. He's going to get more targets than Montrell, but it's more along the lines of how often are the Broncos going to actually work Montrell into the offense. We know he's the primary kick returner or punt returner. He's going to be a special teams star, but how often can you really get him the ball, except for trick plays, when you have so many other mouths to feed? And one of those mouths to feed is KJ Hamler. So by the numbers, I'm taking KJ. How about you, Scott?
I think Hamler also. Last year, if you look at the wide receivers for Russell Wilson on the Seattle Seahawks, the fourth wide receiver had, let me see, 10 receptions for 64 yards. They should throw a lot more, but even if you double that, it's tough for the fourth guy. And I think Montrell should be at best fourth coming in, and hopefully Hamler is a legit all-season number 3. That would be spectacular. But again, there's a ton of mouths to feed on this offense, spreading it around. And Zach and I, we can get into this a little bit later, but Zach and I were talking about fantasy football and why everybody except maybe Javonte Williams, and even then, why everybody except for Russell Wilson is kind of a fantasy football problem because of all of the diversity across the team and weapons. So Montrell, if he has a huge impact on return, he might touch the ball as many times. So if he has a huge impact on returns, your definition of better could be, different. Hopefully it's a good argument at the end and not, who was worse. Hopefully it's definitely who was better. And who's always better for us is Gary Leeds Palmer coming in on Facebook with the Stars. He says, "Good afternoon, Zach and Scott. Is there any way the Seattle Seahawks can win? Don't see it. Go Broncos. Let's ride." Go ahead, Zach. I'll let you take this.
There was a movie made about it called Any Given Sunday, and that holds up in reality, in the year 2022. There's a way the Seahawks can win if they play better than the Broncos and they score more points, a la John Madden analysis. But if another reason they could lose the Broncos is if they walk into Seattle like the Cowboys were acting like when the Broncos came to town last year, completely overconfident, completely assured and guaranteed they were going to win, and they don't have to try as hard. If the Broncos get too big aheads with this game with Russell Wilson and the revenge factor, they could underperform. But I was going to say earlier, Scott, you can play this game in Seattle and Denver on the moon. The Broncos on paper are a better football team. And that's what it comes down to. They have better players and I think better coaches. So if the Broncos play their brand of football, they should have no problems.
Yeah, I think there's better depth. The Seahawks weren't as bad as their record last year. I don't think if you look overall across, the different metrics and stuff, considering that they had the same record as like the Atlanta Falcons, there wasn't any comparison. Seattle was a much better team, some tougher loss, some unexplainable losses in there. And then they beat some good teams. They had a tougher schedule. But if you walk in there, and I don't think it's really you have to worry about them even getting up on this. This team is chomping at the bit. Most of the starters haven't gotten to play. This isn't game 6 where they're starting, kind of into the grind. It's a game 1, Monday Night Football. Sunday night might be the big one now, but Monday Night Football is still a big deal on national TV. Russell coming home. These boys are going to be up for it. Can the Seahawks win? Yeah, they can, but they are a big home dog for a reason. Denver Broncos should be the better team.
Yeah, right. should is the operative word there.
He should. That's why you got to play him. But it's a big spread in NFL is 7 points, and the Broncos are 6.5. That's a big spread. We're not talking college football with a 49-point line or an off.
Sure.
It's a touchdown. It's a touchdown. But being a road dog, there's a bunch of them this year, actually. So there's some big swings in teams this year. This week, there's a bunch of road dogs. Check out MyBookie, where we posted it in the description. Go look at it because there's more road dogs this week than I'm used to seeing ever.
And use code Wilson22 when you check out.
Yeah, to double your deposit. Michaela comes in. She's coming in yellow.
Thank you,
She says,
Michaela.
"Hi, Scott and Zach. Much love to you all." Right back at you, Michaela. For the Broncos, must items on the agenda have been accomplished. Now let's ride. Yeah, the must-haves for sure. As far as the off-season checklists, I think the one we'd probably still like to have seen addressed as a healthy right tackle.
That'd be nice.
But all of the other things, quarterback, yep. Edge rushers, got them. Resign your quarterback, got those. New coach, yep. New ownership, done. Let's ride. Absolutely, Michaela.
Mic drop. Nothing more to add. Yeah, the Broncos have to just play football now, stay healthy, and win games. That's what's left on the bucket list for this year.
So thanks again, Michaela. Appreciate you for sure. We can get into the topic of the show. We're 15 minutes in. It's actually earlier to get into it than usual. We can start focusing on the Seahawks, and if you want, we can just start with a glamour position where there's, for most teams, it's considered a glamour position. But Geno Smith looks like he's going to be the starter against the Broncos. Quarterback. Any controversy there, or Geno Smith, Drew Lock? It would have been an interesting story, but Geno Smith's going to be the guy, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, their situation played out eerily similar to last year with the Broncos, where they had Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, and they went with the safer, higher floor choice. And I say that loosely in Geno Smith. Both are terrible choices. And, I was obviously a big Drew proponent, but when I watched that preseason game a few weeks ago with his job on the line pretty much, and he throws 2 brutal picks, I'm like, okay, you know what? The Broncos were right. They got Russell Wilson. Drew's their problem now. So, yeah, Geno's going to be the guy, but he's, to me, a little frail as a quarterback. And if the Broncos get after him enough and hit him, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying we might see number 2 in the game, number 2 being Drew Lock.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion in there about, Drew Lock deserves this, Drew Lock deserves that. And I'm like, most guys don't get a 3rd year in the NFL, a 4th year in the NFL. They just don't. That's the average lifespan for guys is less than that. They're, you usually know what you got by then, and you're either moving on or looking to re-sign, or they're established. I looked at some numbers, and looking at how Geno Smith performed last year for the Seattle Seahawks, I'm not surprised that Pete Carroll says, okay, I'm okay with this. When he came in, he played pretty well last year. He came in on an emergency against the Rams, so he didn't get the start on that. 10 of 17, touchdown, interception. And then the next 3 games, 23 of 32, touchdown, no interception. He didn't throw another interception. 12 for 22, touchdown, 20 for 24 against Jacksonville in a win, 2 touchdowns, no interception. So in his 4 appearances, 3 starts, he was 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. His cumulative rating was 103, which is really, really good. It was a 1/10 of a point lower than what Russell Wilson had. He had his 3 starts, his lowest quarterback rating, for whatever you want to take this as, was 94.3. So he had 3 90-plus quarterback ratings. You want to take a guess off the top of your head how many 90-plus quarterback ratings Drew Lock had as a starter?
I'm going to say 0 or 1 at most.
Wasn't that bad. No, it wasn't that bad. It was 7. It was 7. So Geno Smith had 3 and 3 starts last year. Drew Lock had 7 in his career. So, it's, again, like you said, there is no right answer is the problem. It's Geno Smith, Drew Lock, oh God, what are we doing here? Were they in it? Do you remember? Because I was thinking about this. Were they one of the teams that was kicking the tires on Deshaun Watson? Or was there someone else that they were talking about, you remember, in the offseason as maybe that they were going after?
Garoppolo was the other guy, I thought. Okay. Deshaun was either Carolina or Cleveland all the way. So
New Orleans and Atlanta were in their big at the end. I mean, Atlanta thought it was done. Atlanta thought it was done, which would have been real interesting, because Arthur Blank, Deshaun was a ball boy in Atlanta while Arthur Blank was there. So Arthur Blank, the owner, was spearheading all of that until, someone came up with $250 million of guaranteed money, and then it doesn't really matter anymore. What matters to me, though, Ben Wallman coming in with the support. He does not have a question yet. Ben, I can't quite tell what that picture is. Oh, it's a Bronco.
It's like a Broncos Batman symbol.
Yeah, I was like, it's a Bronco with like Snoopy and looking up at the moon for the Great Pumpkin or something. It's the Great Bronco.
Scott, I have a question for you though. You rattled off those Geno numbers. How many games did they win though in his starts?
1. They were 1 and 2.
Sounds a lot like Teddy Bridgewater to me. He's just an average middling
Yeah.
starter with middling numbers. He's not ever going to throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns a game. He'll throw for 200 yards, I would assume was his average in those 3 starts, 200,
Yeah,
250
it
yards
wasn't
maybe.
even. He was
Yeah.
175, 180. He's a good stopgap, which is what Teddy was his entire career until the Carolina Panthers lost their minds. We had the discussion all last year. Teddy Bridgewater was a $6 or $7 million quarterback that Carolina handed after a nice hot run with the Saints, handed a $20 million a year contract to. It was insane. Which that's not Teddy's fault. But what was Drew Lock's record last year starting for the Broncos?
I don't want I don't want to have to remember that. All I heard was Geno
It was 0
Bridgewater.
3. He was 0 3 as a starter. They were 0 3. So again, you're like, I've got crap and more crap. It's not a good situation at quarterback for them. Now, what are you doing here? What's your goal for the season if you're the Seattle Seahawks, honestly?
I think their goal is to rebuild, and I think they know that. 2 average quarterbacks, an older roster in some portions that it's just not blowing off the tape to anyone. I think they're in for a long season, Seattle, and I think Pete Carroll and John Schneider know that. So their expectations aren't too high, I feel like.
Yeah, it's do we want to put together a good roster and get our quarterback next year? I mean, is it the Broncos? Is that what you're looking for? Is that your model right now? I've got, if I'm sitting here looking and I've got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Rashad Penny. I just spent a second round pick on Kenneth Walker, Michigan State, guy ran for 1,700 yards and 18 touchdowns last year. I've got some pretty good pieces on defense. We mentioned that the quarterback situation is very similar to Denver Broncos last year. It feels like most of the situation is a lot like Denver Broncos last year. This roster is not awful. There's some good pieces there. So you've got to be careful that the quarterback doesn't go on a heater and lifting up the rest of the players, because there's some talent here. There is.
It's going to come down to the C word, which you've been on the podcast enough now with me, Scott, to know what that C word is, and it's coaching. And it comes down to Pete Carroll and Shane Waldron, I think, is their OC, and whatever they can do with Geno Smith and or Drew Lock, they're going to do. But I was going to say to the previous thing about quarterbacks, if the Broncos in week 1 cannot beat the second coming of Teddy Bridgewater with this roster, there's an issue. They really should have on paper no problems taking care of the Seahawks.
Yeah, like I said, they're a big favorite for a reason, and 7 points on the road in the NFL is a big number. Now, I'll tell you what, going back and looking at the MyBookie read, and looking at the site, I went down, and what struck me, I've told you before, I do pretty good over-unders on this, and I'm pretty good at this at picking these. So when I see something that stands out to me, the over-under stood out to me. When you're looking at this and you're thinking the over-under with a 6.5-point favorite, I don't know if you've looked at it. If you haven't, then this isn't going to be any good. But what would you think the over-under is? Like, if you've got a score prediction, conservatively, what would you think of the score?
I'm going to say like it's 35 or 36.
Okay. Then you want to go under. I'm thinking, sorry to blow my, we'll do this again later as we get through the week, but I'm thinking 34-17. 30, 27, 21, that's 48 points. Over under on this is only 43.
That's close.
So yeah, it was low. It's low, and you were even lower than that. So you're thinking 28-6.
I could see that
as a type of score, which is possible. So for some reason I felt like, if the Broncos get in the 30s, which I kind of expect, then you only need 10 points from the Seattle Seahawks. So we're kind of moving up this. But Howie freaking Day coming in and said, "What's up, fellas? Last weekend without meaningful football." I still like the college game. I don't watch it like I used to, though. I used to be, I'd watch the 5 straight SEC games when I was, about 25 to 35, honestly. Noon, 3, 6, 7, and 9. There were 5 straight games. I watched all 5 of them. Now I'm lucky if I catch pieces of 5 of them. And last night I fell asleep watching Utah, Florida. So, and I think Georgia and Oregon was enough to put you to sleep, unless you were a Georgia fan, because that one got was over quickly. So I do like college football. And Phil comes in. He says, which matchups, if any, does Seattle win? Good question, Phil.
Not quarterback. I know that for one.
But the quarterbacks don't play each other. So
yeah, I mean, just like on each team respectively, like their counterparts.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I was gonna say receiver, they had. I'm just trying to think of the Seahawks roster, where they're overly better than the Broncos. And I can't say I'm a Seahawks expert, but let's say defense, for example. That defensive line, that front seven could give the Broncos O-line some problems, considering they never had a chance to gel together in the preseason. They have, hopefully, we think Billy Turner at right tackle. So it could be, a tough situation there. That's where Seattle could get the upper hand, but I can't think of anywhere else.
I like both of their receivers are really good. Of their top two, and you got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So, if Surtain's able to take out one, you're able to roll coverage over to the other. That should help. But if you've got those guys one-on-one, you like the Surtain matchup most of the time. And that's no disrespect to Pat Surtain. A good wide receiver is going to beat a good corner if all else is equal, because it's just the way the rules are. It's the way the game is. The corner's having to guess which way he's going. And, it's just the way it is. If you can hold your own and limit the guy and limit the yards after the catch, you did a good job as a corner. Giving up some catches, that it's going to happen. So if you're one-on-one on the other side, and you're going Darby against Lockett or Metcalf, depending on how that is, that's a matchup I could see going towards the Seahawks if you get decent quarterback play, if you're able to protect him. That's the problem about having those receivers. What good's a receiver if the quarterback isn't worth a damn? What good is a receiver if the quarterback is pretty good and he's on his back? So that's the problem with this team, Zach, is the two best players on offense are both receivers, and you don't have any guarantee you can even get them the ball.
You made the 2 points I was going to make. Excellent. Yeah. About, they put DK on Ronald Darby. I'm panicking a little bit, but I would assume you have double coverage with Justin Simmons in a bracket or over the top in some capacity. I hope, because I don't trust Darby one-on-one with Metcalf. PS2, different story. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say as well, the Seahawks receivers aren't bad. It might be the strength of their team, but when you have Geno Smith at quarterback, it might not matter. If the Broncos get after Geno enough and confound him and sack him and harass him, DK and Tyler ain't doing nothing. And after them, Scott, who really is there to catch the ball?
After them, you've got a couple of good running backs. Be careful saying that too loud. Noah Fant might hear you. It's one of those. I am so superstitious. As analytical and logical as I am a superstitious mug. For God's sakes, the gods of football and everything else will hear you if you are too loud. And Noah Fant will have 10 catches for 140 yards. Who else is going to catch the ball? Oh crap! I forgot about the former Bronco. But Noah Fant could be a guy for them. Question in here real quick. Victor T, I like what he says. So the Seahawks aren't even starting Lock. Does that officially mean Denver won the trade? I don't think Drew Lock was the linchpin of that trade. The fact is, it's one of the problems a little bit with the whole system. I do like international football because they trade in cash. You buy out somebody's contract. So if I want Russell Wilson, I'm going to send you $200 million, and then I have to sign him to a new contract. But I'm buying out his contract. So you can get better right away. You can take that money and go buy a veteran. I can go buy 4 veterans. I can go get 4 new offensive linemen at $50 million a piece. That's how international soccer works, which is really cool. In American sports, the currency of trade is veterans for draft picks or young prospects who are unproven. So on paper, you really, really like what the Seahawks were able to do. You got a guy that wanted to get away, and you were able to get some really, really good draft capital, a starting defensive lineman, a starting tight end, and a serviceable quarterback out of it. That's good. That's a good return for a want-away 33-year-old quarterback. It's a really good return. But unfortunately, you don't know how it's going to pan out because you don't know how you're going to do in the draft. So Charles Cross we'll see. He's a maybe. There's no definites there. Not that there's ever any sure things. Russell Wilson's not a sure thing. But when you trade for draft picks, it depends on how you draft. And that won't be anything. But on paper, I thought it was a really good deal for both teams.
Yeah, note of clarification. I didn't forget about Noah Fant. I just don't think he's going to do anything. So I'm just
I
kind of
know.
discounting him completely. In terms of the trade, I thought the Broncos won it. I mean, not surrendering more than 2 first-round draft picks, first rounds alone, was a steal for the Broncos. Giving up players that really weren't foundational guys. We all like Shelby Harris, but he wasn't Simmons or PS2 or even Draymond Jones. He was expendable. Noah Fant expendable. Drew Lock in that trade expendable. You're getting a 9-time Pro Bowler, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a decade long now. I think it was a win for both sides, but the only thing that the Seattle can fall back on is the capital they've received in return, but that's going to be diminished if the Broncos have a good season. If they go on a major playoff run, that capital is not going to be worth as much as the Seahawks pick the Broncos got back. So I think if you have to decide, the Broncos won this trade.
Yeah, and you're in a different window. Like for the most part, the Denver Broncos are a young team. Now they have a veteran quarterback. If this was if this was an old team and this was like now or next year or never, you'd be a little bit more nervous about it. But this is a team that can keep growing, and you'll have free agency money, and it's a team that's now has a window for 7-8 years. I mean, think of who the stars are on this team. None of them are at the end of their careers. You talk, who are the old guys out there? Kareem Jackson. Okay. Okay. I'm done. Everybody else is a young player. So you could afford to not have your draft picks and try and force them into a lineup with a bunch of, good young veterans. So the Seattle got what they needed. The Broncos got what they needed. So again, that's why I feel like it was a good deal for both. Having been on the other side of that, we're a crappy team. A lot of people in Atlanta were very envious of what the Seattle Seahawks did. I promise you that. They were very envious. RD coming in from it looks like Canadian Dallas. So north of the border. Welcome in, RD. Appreciate you being here. It feels like a newer set of initials and location for us, so appreciate you being here. He says, are you worried new team and no preseason games will cause a slow start? Playoffs will be hard if you don't start 4-0 and 3-1 based on the schedule.
I don't know personally if the preseason is going to correlate to the regular season, but that's kind of why I predicted the over-under as I did, a lower number, because maybe this is a game the Broncos don't win on offense. Maybe this is a game where the defense takes over because they are a little ahead of the offense based on training camp and the preseason. So slow is subjective. If the Broncos win, 24-18 instead of 40-0, a win's a win. I don't care how they get the victories as long as they get those dubs. But it could be a case where until midseason, and that's what you want anyway. You don't want the Broncos. It's like peaking in high school. You don't want to peak in high school. You want to peak later in life. And we want the Broncos to peak later in the season. So if it's a slow start and they're still winning games, fine. If they drop a game in the first quarter of the season, fine. It's no time to panic. Let the Broncos find themselves. And by December, they're going to be a well-oiled machine.
I agree with you, though, RD. You need to, with all of the newness, coming out with a fairly hot start with the new coach who's unproven, is the quarterback, all the questions, they're not shouts, but they're questions. They get a little bit louder, and all that noise starts getting a little bit louder, and the schedule does toughen up the second half of the season. So I think I had the Broncos 6-2 after the first 8, but we'll see. Will it be a slow start again? Get the dubs. At the end of the season, they don't ask you how, they ask you how many. So get the dubs and no one will care. Go out and win. And if you watch the Seattle Seahawks in the preseason at all, there wasn't anything about their starters playing that scares you, that makes you think. They played some of their starters, and that filled you with confidence, frankly.
There's also the case, real quick, Scott, sorry to cut you off, where...
It's okay, I do it all the time.
If the Broncos can't beat teams like Seattle, Houston, the Jets, there's a case to be made. They don't deserve to make the playoffs anyway. Right. So I don't want to say any game's a gimme or a guarantee, but these are inferior teams compared to Denver, rusty or not.
Yeah, if you want to be at the end of the season, if you want to be one of those teams that people are talking about, these are the games you have to win.
Yeah.
Or at least it makes it harder because then you got to sneak one. It's like, okay, I may have to go to Kansas City and get a win now, or I'm going to have to win one that I might not be expected to. You're expected to win this game. Again, appreciate you, RD. Thanks again for coming in. Mentioned some of the Andrew Baker coming in here. I like to take care of the superstars coming in. Andrew's one of those guys. It's up, Zack and Scott and fam. The fam part, that's all y'all. Who gets more yards week run? The running game or the pass catchers?
I'm going to take my brain over my heart here. And I feel like the Broncos are going to overcompensate a little bit. I don't blame them necessarily. I feel like they're going to just make Russ the centerpiece of that game. They're going to unleash him in Seattle in front of his former adoring fans for the whole world to see. They're going to let Russ cook. So I'm going to say this game is going to be won through the air on the strength of Russell Wilson. It might not be 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, but it could be 250 and 3 touchdowns, something like that. Week 2. Though, let's say the Broncos start off 1-0, they come home for their home opener, they play Houston of all teams. That's a game where they can win with their ground game alone. So I'm going to say pass catchers week 1, and then Javonte and Melvin take over week 2, 2-0.
Yeah, and Andrew, you when I'm thinking of this, I'm like, okay, do I remove the running backs' receiving yards from the total yards? So is it the receivers and tight ends to have more yards than the other guys rushing? Because if I take yards from scrimmage, I'm going to feel pretty good about the running backs week in and week out, honestly, Zach.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to feel good about the running game anyway, as long as the Broncos commit to it. They have 2 and actually 3 really good running backs.
No, I mean, not just running game. I mean, just run the yards from scrimmage. So include the reception yardage that Javonte and Melvin Gordon and Mike Boone could have. It could be 60 to 70 plus yards per game. Frankly, I'll be a little surprised if it's not. That they get 5-6 catches a game between the offensive backfield. That will start to add up, and then you run for 100 minimum. You'd like to think. So you're talking 170, 180 yards a game as a baseline for your running backs from scrimmage. That would be that'd be a pretty good. Well, we talk about all these prop bets. That's where I'd set mine, right about there.
Yeah. I was a little distracted because I saw Williams' comment here. He thinks I meant the Jets game was week 3. I'm just saying the teams on the Broncos schedule that they're facing this year. The Jets are on there, and that's just an inferior team. The 49ers, obviously, we know it's week 3. The MHH meetup is happening that day. That's going to be the first barometer, though, for Denver. They can start off 2-0, but those games won't matter until they play a legitimate contender like the Niners. Not unlike last year, Scott, when they went 3-0 and played Baltimore. Look what happened in that game.
Yeah, that was we gotta wait and see. I remember going back there. I'm not gonna revise history and say, listen, I'm not gonna say they're pretenders, but they've done what they were asked to do. And then Baltimore, how much difference would it have made? How much what all changed? But Baltimore beat up Teddy Bridgewater and beat up the team. I mean, that was an ugly game.
And Vic Fangio's feelings as well. Those were supremely beat up.
Yeah, that was oh God, that was embarrassing. That was definitely embarrassing. We're fairly caught up on the chat and supers and everything. We're about 40 minutes in, so we got some time to kill. I'm going to get back to this the matchups question. Because when we talk about matchups, typically you like to, if you're talking about strength of roster, we can line it up position for position. Quarterback, but the quarterbacks don't face each other, so the matchups become, cornerback against receiver. So right tackle, that's one of the big concerns we have. Right tackle, and if they're coming out in a 3-4, also you're looking at Darrell Taylor and Nwaso. I can't pronounce his name. Uchenna Inoso. I can't pronounce his name.
That's your bag.
I don't know these guys very well.
The pronunciation king on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm better with the Spanish names.
Nwoso.
But last year the teams that led who led their team, Carlos Dunlap gone, Rasheem Green gone, Darrell Taylor. I think I just said him. Darrell Taylor, is he the other starter? Yeah, he's the other starter at 6.5 sacks. So your leading returning sack is 6.5. And then after that, it drops down to 2 and then a bunch of 1s. So
where's Shelby at?
Oh, well, I'm looking from last year.
Oh, okay.
So last year, but in a 3-4, he's more inside. I shouldn't have him too much one-on-one. And didn't he play on the right side last year? Wouldn't he be on Garrett Bowles' side?
Yeah.
So they might move him around a little bit. But you're more concerned with the edge
Yes.
than an edge against a tackle. So right now, it looks like their starting opposite edge is Nwosu, and I really don't know. It looks like he came from the Chargers, possibly. I don't know anything about him.
Chase has the correct answer here. Boy Mafe, I'm pretty sure he's an edge player for Seattle, and that's who's going to be their starter or at least a key contributor. And yeah, they put Mafe off the edge against Turner. Could be a problem. So I hope they hold up there. Right tackle is pretty much my only worry with this Broncos roster. They've solved every other hole, but right tackle, man, that continues to remain just a sticking point.
Yeah, and that's you start getting a little nervous when there's two of them out there. And Boye Mafe, good shout there. He's still listed second team, but I think he's going to get starter snaps in pass rushing situations. Very, very good player, very good athlete, good at the Senior Bowl, and he's been doing really well in the preseason from all the things I've read and heard in Seattle. So yeah, good shout on that one. So he could be a guy out there as far as matchups again, but it's not as scary a matchup as we might see later on in the season when you've got two. Because if I've got one good one, and then I trust I can double up one guy. It's hard to double up two guys. I can leave a back in there. I can chip him with a tight end. I can do all those type of things to slow him down when I've got one monster rusher out there. When there's two of them out there that are really good, it scares me a little more. So this defensive line right now, the matchup that you fear the most, it's not their strength. So it's not strength on weakness. It's kind of weakness on weakness. So that's all right. I can live with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, those players aren't like, Max Crosby, Khalil Mack. Some of these players they'll see in the AFC West, but they're also going to face off against a hobbled Billy Turner, who has not seen one rep since signing with the Broncos. Coming off a knee scope, a knee injury torpedoed his job with the Packers. That's a hard situation in a loud environment in Seattle for Billy Turner to be in, and I just hope he holds up because Scott, Seattle's going to attack that side.
Nwosu had 5 sacks last year, starting 15 games for the Chargers. 40 tackles, 5 sacks. So, not overwhelming numbers.
Bunch of Shelby Harris's on that roster, honestly. 6-7 sacks per person.
Yeah. So again, Shelby's a good player. Again, a 3-4. I talk about it all the time. An interior lineman on a 3-4. If you get good numbers from that, it's just a bonus. Their job is to let the linebackers flow free. So it is really tough. Secondary, Jamal Adams out there. We worried about him? He was a guy that cost a lot. Speaking of draft capital for a safety, him and Quandre Diggs, and then Tyreek Woolen was a guy I liked in the draft, but he's listed as a first teamer. And he was he was a UTSA 6'4" corner that we really like. So, are they trying to go back with the Richard Sherman here, trying to reinvent the Richard Sherman here? Because
maybe the Legion of Boom.
6'4", 200 pounds. He was a 4'3" guy, freak of an athlete, but I think there were questions about his coverage ability, and you still got to do that coming out. So you feel good about that matchup. I tell you what, against a rookie corner.
It just goes to show you how far they've fallen off since the LOB and when they're just forcing Woolen into first-team reps. I'm not scared of Jamal Adams. I thought that was one of the stupidest trades I've ever seen an NFL team make for a safety who's not even for me, a game-changing safety. That was a horrible draft pick or a trade. I'm not worried about that. Diggs, though, is a ball hawk. Diggs is what Jamal Adams should be as a safety, and that's the one guy who could give Russell Wilson problems, but it's the one guy who Russell Wilson knows best, having practiced against him and playing with him with Seattle. I'm not too worried about Russell throwing the ball Diggs' way or that secondary.
If I'm looking at the edge weapons in the downfield weapons for the Broncos, the wide receivers, the tight ends against the Seattle defensive secondary, ooh, that looks like a big edge to the Broncos. Speaking of edge, let's go to the other side of the ball. And you think Bradley Chubb, how much Randy Gregory do you think we're going to see, and at what percentage? do you think we're going to see Randy Gregory?
I don't think he's going to play 100% of snaps. I think
No,
he's going
I'm
to be.
sorry. I'm sorry. Not 100%. Of course, he won't. He'll sub in. But are we going to see 100% of Randy Gregory, or are we going to see a lesser version while he's ramping up?
I think psychologically, mentally, I think physically he's okay and healed, and the Broncos are working him into practice. But he hasn't had much football contact, and he has to
Mhm.
reacclimate to that. So it might take a few weeks, but he'll be on the field. And fortunately, they can spell him with Nick Benito and Baron Browning, two guys who've looked
Mhm.
excellent in preseason. So the combination of all them plus Bradley Chubb, I really like, Scott, real quick, what the Seahawks did with their draft picks at right tackle, taking Cross and taking Abraham Lucas. Those are two players I wanted the Broncos to get, and the one thing I wanted the Broncos to do, which is address right tackle. But considering the acclimation period it takes for right tackles as well, and the edge players the Broncos have, they could make life a real living hell for Geno next Monday night.
Yeah, we've got a lot of a lot of loyal watchers, a lot of names we recognize, and I think most of y'all remember that how often I was banging the table for Abraham Lucas for the
Yep.
Broncos, especially where he went. That's one of those guys that I'll look, and I think Travis Jones was another one that went down a little bit lower than he was expected. Who ended up in Baltimore, big interior defensive lineman and right tackle. Right now, as we're going through the preseason, what were the two big questions as we're watching the preseason game? Big nose guard, right tackle. But we didn't see everybody. Purcell didn't play. We didn't see DJ Jones yet. Draymond has, we haven't seen the starters. But man, having Travis Jones come in that second team that would have looked pretty good. But I agree with you 100%. If I'm looking at where we just went the other side, where we're talking their pass rush against the Broncos offensive line, which could be questionable. That's not going to be. I don't think that's going to be the team's strength. It doesn't. They're going to have to scheme their way into sacks. They're going to have to pressure guys and gamble. They can't just rely on my guy is going to beat your guy. And boy, that's real fun to call a defense when I can just say, okay, I'm going to drop 7 into coverage and send 4, and I'm going to sack you. You're not getting anywhere. That's when defensive coordinators look like geniuses, and they're not. But on the flip side, you just said it. The Broncos' edge and pass rush against what is a relatively young-ish offensive line and experienced offensive line for the Seahawks looks like the Broncos could eat.
Plus the interior players like you just named. DJ Jones, who played the Seahawks twice a year in San Fran. Draymond, who we all feel is prime for a Pro Bowl or All-Pro year. They can destroy those centers and guards as well, along with the tackles on the edges. So, yeah, it could be a 7-8 sack night. It could be that ridiculous in a good way.
Kid Trunks coming in. Kid Trunks 44 coming in saying, should we run the ball or let Russ cook? Yes.
That's it. Both. Why not
Yeah,
both?
I think you should be able to do both. Honestly, if you run the ball and you set up the play action, you hit the deep balls. You can end up with a game like we didn't see the Broncos have a game like that, but the game I saw against the Broncos like that last year was the first one against the Raiders. It was like 25 yards per completion or something. It was insane. It was big play after big play. It wasn't a ton, but you're running the ball and you're hitting the big play because you're bringing everybody close to the line of scrimmage. Just like, by God, we have to. If I can get 5-6 yards of carry, I'm going to beat you. I'm just going to keep running it. And you're going to have to stop that because you can't get the ball away from me. And I'm just going to go down and chew up clock and score. So as they come in and commit to stopping the run, you're going over the top on them. And does Russell Wilson throw the deep ball much? Is he aggressive at all throwing the ball?
I have to go back to the film for that, see how good he is at the deep ball. Yeah, I think he's decently okay. But, like you said, the run sets up the pass sets up the run. But as I said earlier, I just have a feeling the Broncos are going to make a statement with Russell Wilson. They're going to really prove that they won this trade and he has a lot more to offer, and he shouldn't have been kicked to the curb like he was with the Seahawks. And look, we even have a Seattle fan here, Jalen, coming in peacefully, harmoniously saying, Seahawks fan here, Russ about to cook us. Yeah, it might not be a game where he throws for 500 yards or has the debut that Peyton Manning did, but he could go like 24 or 28 for 275 and 3 touchdowns and a perfect quarterback rating, and I will take that all day, every day.
Yeah, I'm liking, the idea of 17 to 24, 2-3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 250 to 300 yards, and then I'm rushing for 150 on 30 carries. Okay. Frankly, I'm as interested as watching, for all the defensive this blah, blah, blah from last year. No, don't like it. I'm not having it. I'm ready to see the defense attack.
Yes.
I'm ready to see the defense, the bend and eventually give up a field goal. Ugh. It was death by 1,000 cuts last year. What was the phrase? We're not going to have death by whatever last year.
Inches.
Yeah, you did. You had death by 2nd and 3. You had death by 3rd and 1 all year long. I'm looking forward to some 2nd and 14s, some 3rd and 17s, some sacks on 3rd down. I'm looking forward to seeing some throws under duress instead of just, oh, yeah, it's 3rd and 2. I can just dump this right over the middle here. I'm looking to see some throws under duress and let the defensive backs pick the ball off going after it. So the takeaways and the sacks, getting guys off the field last year was painful. For all the expectations, I was more disappointed with the defense last year and the vanilla based blase that we were forced to watch.
Yeah, I think Dylan says it right here, like you were just saying, Scott. Denver played not to lose when they had a coward coach, not this year. And, forget death by inches. I'm looking forward to seeing victory by miles. And that's what we're going to see starting in week 1. I promise you that.
You know what? That's not a bad way to get us out of here, Zach. Victory
No,
by miles. The Mile High Huddle podcast. Victory by miles.
Put on a t-shirt.
Huddle. Put it on a t-shirt. Get the t-shirt, bumper sticker or something. Yeah, and Jay said Vic's defense didn't attack or get turnovers. What they didn't do is give up points. I'll tell you what surprised me last year, though, when I was looking at, at these stats and we talked about as far as the Broncos didn't run many plays and they didn't allow many plays. They just ground the clock down, and that's why they didn't score much. They didn't give up much scores. Well, Seattle's defense was kind of middle of the pack. Let me see. Total defense by scoring was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They were 12th last year. Okay. So not bad. That's upper third. They gave up more plays than anybody per game than anybody in the NFL. So somehow, some way, I'd be interested in, finding, learning more and diving back into it. But they were giving up. They had a ton of plays runs against them, but they weren't giving up a ton of points. So it was a bend but don't break, and literally not you're running down, you're working your way down the field, but not scoring. So that was interesting to me. So I want to look farther into that, and maybe we'll do that on Broncos for breakfast in the morning.
They've also lost a lot of key players on defense, like you highlighted earlier, not to mention Bobby Wagner as well. I believe he went to the Rams, right? So, it's also the case where Russell Wilson has seen Pete Carroll's defense, but Pete Carroll has never seen Russell Wilson's Broncos offense. So at least in week 1, that's going to be a major advantage. That's why I'm really not worried about this game.
Yeah. I mean, I've only root for like one alpha franchise, one alpha team of all my teams, and it's probably this one. Chelsea Football Club is, a big money, big club team. Everything else I've ever had is like underdogs. Man, I worry about everything. my teams are always losing. They're always choking it off at the end and losing when they're, it's nice when they're underdogs and, well, there's no expectations. Well, we were supposed to lose. I'm not used to playing as a favorite. What's all this? What's all this nonsense? It'll be fun to watch.
What do I do with my hands? I don't have any idea right now. That was, though, I think we're going to get out of here tonight, Scott, and just hover handing away. We're going to get out of here for this evening. That was the Mile High Huddle podcast. We're back on tomorrow. I think Chad should be back tomorrow night, he said. So Chad and I back on tomorrow night. Scott, I appreciate you filling in, by the way. But in the meantime, follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod. Also, the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle, Scott on Twitter at Scout Kennedy, and myself at Kelberman NFL. If you guys want some merchandise, you know what it is, where it is, huddleupod.com. Get your merch on ASAP. And Facebook.com/Mile Huddle Pod. Like that page and follow that page. And if you haven't, guys and gals, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave your football pre-save 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, as you see ticking below you, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like y'all. Scott, last word.
Oh, last words on this one. Let me go with this one. SSJ GOAT coming in with the Broncos. As a Seahawks fan, he's like, oh, y'all think you know Russell Wilson. How would you know him better than us? And that's not it, SSJ. It's that even a mediocre Russ Wilson, that you might say was okay, wasn't his best season, is so much farther leaps and bounds above what the Broncos have had a quarterback in the last 6 or 7 years that it is a marked improvement, even if he's not a top 5 guy. He doesn't have to be amazing to lead this team to a championship. He can be really, really good, and he's done that for a long time.
So many salty Seahawks fans on socials, man. But to your SSJ GOAT, you can lay claim to knowing Russell Wilson with the Seahawks, but we're going to lay claim to knowing Russell Wilson with the Broncos, and we're very excited about what he's going to do with this offense, with this collection of talent, and in this scheme. So we'll see y'all in 8 days.
Looking forward to it, man.
We're going to get out of here for tonight, though. Take care. Have a great rest of your holiday weekend. Enjoy the holiday tomorrow. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.